The auctioneer's hammer fell like a death knell, and Saren Whitmore watched her mother's pianoforte sold to a stranger for 12 guineas. 12 guineas. Her mother had played Handel on those keys, had taught Saren to find middle C with pudgy fingers, had laughed and said music was the only honest language left in a world full of liars. 12 guineas, and it was gone. Saren pressed deeper into the shadow of the doorway, her threadbare cloak pulled tight against the November chill that seeped through the walls of Whitmore Hall. Her hall. Her father's hall. The home where she'd been born, where she'd buried both parents, where she'd believed she would live until she married or grew old among familiar ghosts. That was before Aunt Heloise arrived with lawyers and accusations, before Cousin Ivo produced a will no one had ever seen, before Saren found herself standing in the servants' corridor of her own home, watching vultures pick apart the bones of her life. She shouldn't be here. Ivo had made that abundantly clear 3 weeks ago, when he'd had her belongings thrown into the courtyard mud. But she'd come anyway, slipping through the kitchen entrance she'd used 1,000 times as a child, because somewhere in this auction was her mother's locket, the one thing Heloise had refused to return. The crowd shifted, wealthy merchants and minor gentry pressing forward as a mahogany writing desk was carried out. Saren recognized it instantly. Her father's desk, the one where he'd written her letters when she was away at school, always signing them, "Your devoted papa," in his careful script. Sold, gone, erased. She forced herself to breathe, scanning the tables where smaller items waited their turn. Silver candlesticks, porcelain figurines, her grandmother's tea service. And there, half hidden behind a stack of books, a small rosewood box. The locket was inside. It had to be. Saren moved without thinking, weaving through the crowd with her head down, her pulse racing. She was so close. 10 feet. 5 feet. Her fingers brushed the rosewood. "Thief!" The word cracked across the room like a whip. Saren froze, her hand still extended, as every head turned toward her. Ivo Whitmore stood at the edge of the crowd, his pale eyes bright with triumph. He was tall and angular, with the kind of sharp features that might have been handsome if cruelty hadn't carved permanent lines around his mouth. Beside him, Aunt Heloise clutched her handkerchief like a weapon, her expression one of practiced horror. "Guards!" Ivo called, his voice carrying with theatrical precision. "Seize her. That woman is a known thief, cast out of this house for stealing from her own family." No. The word escaped Saren before she could stop it. "That's not true. I only came for my mother's locket. It belongs to me. You see?" Ivo gestured broadly to the assembled crowd. Even now, she admits to trespassing with intent to steal. This is the same woman who forged documents, embezzled funds, and attempted to defraud the rightful heirs of Whitmore Hall. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Saren saw recognition dawn on faces she'd known her entire life. Neighbors who'd dined at her father's table. Merchants who'd called her Miss Whitmore, with respect. Now they looked at her with suspicion, with disgust, with the particular satisfaction of watching someone fall. 2 footmen advanced, their expressions apologetic but determined. Saren backed away, her shoulders hitting the wall. "Please," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "I've taken nothing. Search me if you must. I only wanted what was already mine." "Nothing here is yours." Heloise's voice dripped with venom beneath its veneer of wounded gentility. "You were a charity case, Saren, a cuckoo in the nest. My poor brother-in-law was too soft-hearted to see it, but we know what you truly are." The footmen's hands closed around Saren's arms. She struggled instinctively, dignity abandoned, as they began to drag her toward the door. The crowd parted like water, no one meeting her eyes, no one stepping forward. This was how it ended. Not with justice, not with truth, but with public humiliation and private despair. "Unhand her!" The voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, deep, commanding, utterly certain of being obeyed. The footmen stopped. The crowd fell silent. Even Ivo's triumphant expression flickered with uncertainty. Seren lifted her head and saw him. He stood near the entrance, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark greatcoat that probably cost more than everything being auctioned today combined. His hair was black, swept back from a face of sharp angles and shadowed intensity. But it was his eyes that held her, gray as winter storms, cold as iron, fixed on her with an expression she couldn't begin to decipher. "Your Grace," Ivo recovered quickly, executing a bow that was almost a grovel. "I apologize for this disruption. We were simply removing a trespasser. I know precisely what you were doing." The man, the Duke, because he could only be a Duke with that bearing and that title, moved through the crowd as though it didn't exist. People scrambled to clear his path. "What I don't understand is why you're manhandling my betrothed." The word detonated in the silence. Betrothed. Serene's mind went blank. She opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. Around her, she could actually hear the collective intake of breath. You're betrothed?" Ivo's pale complexion had gone paler still. "Surely you're mistaken, Your Grace. This woman is Seren Whitmore, a disgraced— I know who she is." The Duke reached Seren's side, and with a look that made the footman release her instantly, took her hand. His grip was warm and firm, an anchor in a storm she didn't understand. "Miss Whitmore and I have had an understanding for some months now. I had hoped to formalize the arrangement privately, but given the circumstances—" He paused, surveying the crowd with aristocratic disdain that made several people physically step backward. "I'm sure you'll all agree that a lady's honor must be defended, regardless of whatever unpleasantness preceded my arrival." Heloise had gone a shade of purple that suggested imminent apoplexy. "Your Grace, you cannot possibly be aware of this woman's true character. She is a liar, a thief." "Careful, Mrs. Whitmore." The Duke's voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. "You're speaking about the future Duchess of Ashworth. I would hate for your accusations to reach ears that might find them actionable." Duchess of Ashworth. Seren heard the title as if from a great distance. She knew that name. Everyone in England knew that name. Alaric Vane, the 6th Duke of Ashworth. One of the wealthiest peers in the realm, famously reclusive, rumored to be difficult, dangerous, or both. And he had just claimed her as his intended bride. "Miss Whitmore," he said, turning to her with a face that revealed nothing. "I believe we should take our leave. My carriage is waiting." She should refuse. She should announce this was madness, a mistake, that she had never met this man before in her life. But Ivo's face had twisted with rage barely contained, and Eloise looked ready to claw out her eyes. And somewhere on that table, in that rosewood box, her mother's locket remained out of reach. Serene met the Duke's storm-colored eyes and saw something flicker there. A question, perhaps, or a command. "Yes, Your Grace," she heard herself say. "I believe we should." His hand tightened almost imperceptibly on hers. He tucked her arm through his and led her through the parting crowd, past Ivo's impotent fury, past Heloise's sputtering outrage, past the wreckage of her former life. The November air hit her face like a slap. A gleaming black carriage waited at the end of the drive, horses stamping impatiently. Only when they were inside, the door closed against the watching world, did Seren finally find her voice. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why did you do that?" The Duke settled into the seat across from her, his expression giving nothing away. "Those are excellent questions, Miss Whitmore," he said. "And I suspect the answers will complicate both our lives considerably." The carriage lurched forward, carrying her away from everything she knew. Seren pressed herself against the carriage's leather seat, putting as much distance between herself and the stranger as the confined space allowed. Her pulse drummed with a new kind of fear, different from the humiliation of the auction hall, but no less sharp. She had just climbed into a carriage with a man she didn't know, a man who had claimed her as his betrothed in front of 50 witnesses. "You should know," she said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will, "that I have nothing worth stealing. If this is some elaborate scheme, if I wanted to steal from you, Miss Whitmore, I wouldn't have announced my intentions to half the county." The Duke's tone was dry, almost amused. "Nor would I require an elaborate scheme. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Then why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her with that pale, assessing stare, his features betraying nothing. Seren resisted the urge to smooth her hair. She knew how she must look. 3 weeks of poverty had stripped away the polish of a gentleman's daughter. "You were about to be destroyed," he said finally. Publicly, thoroughly, and with considerable enthusiasm. I found it distasteful. "So you intervened on a whim? Claimed a stranger as your future wife because you found cruelty distasteful? When you phrase it that way, it does sound impulsive. It sounds insane." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something close. "I've been called worse." Seren's hands clenched in her lap. "Your Grace, I appreciate whatever gallant impulse led to your intervention, but you must see this cannot continue. You've made a claim you cannot possibly intend to honor. Your reputation, my reputation will survive." He cut her off without heat. "Yours, however, will not. The moment I release you from this carriage, your cousin will resume his campaign to destroy you. You have no money, no connections, and no friends willing to risk association. Within a week, you'll be begging for scraps, or selling yourself in ways I suspect would destroy you long before poverty could." The words landed like blows, each one true, and each one terrible. Seren looked away, blinking against the sting in her eyes. "You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." His voice softened. "Barely. I know your father was Marcus Whitmore, a respected gentleman who made his fortune in trade and married above his station. I know your mother was Catherine Ashby, the youngest daughter of a viscount, disowned for marrying for love. I know they raised you with education and affection, and when they died, your father's half-brother's family descended like vultures." Serene's head snapped back toward him. "How do you know all that?" "Because I make it my business to know things, and because your father was, briefly, a business associate of mine. We corresponded about shipping investments. He mentioned you often, called you his fierce little scholar. Said you were smarter than most men he knew and twice as stubborn." The words hit Seren somewhere deep, in a place she'd tried to wall off since the day her father died. Papa had talked about her, to a duke, had been proud of her. "I don't understand," she managed. "If you knew my father, why didn't you come forward when they accused me?" "Because I didn't know until recently. I've been abroad for 18 months, handling affairs on the continent. I returned to England 3 days ago and learned what had befallen Marcus Whitmore's daughter almost by accident." His jaw tightened. "I arrived at that auction intending to purchase your father's library. Finding you being dragged out like a criminal was not part of my plan. So you invented a betrothal on the spot? It was the most efficient solution. Your cousin couldn't challenge a duke's claim without risking ruin himself. And a betrothal, unlike a rescue, gives you protection that extends beyond this carriage ride." Seren's mind raced, searching for the trap. "What do you want in return?" The question hung between them. She watched something shift in his expression, calculation giving way to something more complicated. I find myself in need of a similar fiction, he said slowly. My grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, has decided I must marry immediately. She selected a candidate, Lady Araminta Holt, and has arranged for her to be present at every social function. Refusal has proven ineffective, but a prior engagement would give you an excuse to reject her, Seren finished. You want me to pretend to be your betrothed so you can escape an unwanted marriage. I want us to help each other. You need protection, a place to live, time to rebuild your reputation. I need relief from my grandmother's matchmaking. We maintain the fiction through the season, appear appropriately devoted in public, and when enough time has passed, we'll stage an amicable parting. You'll emerge with your reputation restored, and resources enough to establish yourself independently. It was mad. It was manipulative. It was, Seren realized with creeping dismay, possibly her only option. And if people discover the truth? They won't. We'll control the narrative carefully. My sister Otillie will support the story. She's been desperate for a companion and will welcome you into the household with genuine enthusiasm. You're very confident for someone proposing an elaborate deception. I'm confident because I've thought this through. He met her eyes directly. But I won't force you, Miss Whitmore. If you'd prefer, I'll have this carriage return you to wherever you've been staying. The choice is yours. The carriage swayed as it rounded a corner. Outside the window, London's outskirts were giving way to finer neighborhoods, grand houses with iron gates. Seren thought of the cramped boarding house room she'd been sharing with 3 other women, the meals she'd been skipping to preserve what little money remained. She thought of her mother's locket, still sitting on that table in Whitmore Hall. 3 conditions, she said. His eyebrow rose. You're negotiating? You need me as much as I need you. That makes this a partnership, not a charity. She lifted her chin. First, you help me recover my mother's locket. I don't care how. Buy it, steal it, burn Whitmore Hall to the ground if you must. But I want it back. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Agreed. And, second, when this ends, I want enough to establish myself properly. Not scraps. A real settlement. Enough to live independently without relying on anyone's goodwill ever again. Also agreed. Third. She held his gaze, refusing to flinch. If you develop genuine feelings for someone else during our arrangement, you tell me immediately. I won't be made a fool of, Your Grace. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. You have my word, Miss Whitmore. All 3 conditions. Seren looked at his hand. Large, elegant, the hand of a man who had never scrubbed floors or mended his own clothes. She took it. His grip was warm and sure, sealing a bargain that would either save her or destroy her entirely. Then we have an agreement, Your Grace. Alaric, he said. If we're to be betrothed, you should probably use my name. Alaric, she repeated, testing the weight of it. And you must call me Seren. Seren, welcome to Ashworth House. The carriage rolled on toward a future she couldn't begin to predict. Ashworth House rose from the London twilight, like a palace from a fever dream. Seren had seen grand houses before. She'd visited estates during her father's prosperous years, attended parties in homes that sparkled with wealth. But nothing had prepared her for this. 4 stories of cream-colored stone, columns flanking an entrance wide enough to drive a carriage through, windows blazing with candlelight that spilled onto the curved drive like liquid gold. This is your house, she said faintly. One of them. Alaric didn't look up from adjusting his gloves. The London residence, Ashworth Park in Kent, is considerably larger. Considerably larger. Of course, the carriage door opened before she could respond. A footman in immaculate livery handed her down with practiced deference. his expression betraying not a flicker of curiosity about his master's bedraggled companion. Seren's worn boots touched the flagstones, and she suddenly became acutely aware of every patch on her cloak, every loose thread in her hem. She didn't belong here. The very stones seemed to whisper it. "Miss Whitmore will be staying in the Rose Suite," Alaric told the butler who materialized at the door. "Have Mrs. Pemberton prepare it immediately, and send word to my sister that I wish to see her in the drawing room." "Very good, Your Grace." Seren followed Alaric through the entrance hall, her head turning involuntarily as she tried to absorb the onslaught of beauty. Marble floors inlaid with intricate patterns, a sweeping staircase that curved upward like a promise, portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching from gilded frames, crystal chandeliers that caught the candlelight and scattered it into rainbows. This was where she would live, this impossible, overwhelming, utterly foreign world. "You'll adjust," Alaric said, and she realized he'd been watching her reaction. "The house is large, but the staff will help you navigate." "Your sister? What is she like?" Before he could answer, a door burst open somewhere above them, and a whirlwind of rose-colored muslin came flying down the staircase. "Alaric, you're back!" The whirlwind resolved into a young woman of perhaps 19, with dark hair tumbling loose from its pins and bright brown eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom, her gaze landing on Seren. "Oh, is this her? Is this the mysterious betrothed?" "Ottilie." Alaric's voice carried a note of warning, but his sister had already descended the remaining stairs and seized Seren's hands. "I'm Ottilie. You must be Seren. May I call you Seren? Tell me everything. How did you survive his appalling manners long enough to accept his proposal?" "Ottilie," Alaric repeated, more firmly. "Perhaps allow Miss Whitmore to breathe before interrogating her." "Breathing is overrated." Ottilie squeezed Serene's hands. "You poor thing. You look exhausted. And is that mud on your hem? What on earth has my brother subjected you to?" "It's a long story," Seren managed. "I adore long stories. Come, we'll have tea and you'll tell me everything." The drawing room was beautiful, all pale silk wallpaper and comfortable furniture arranged around a crackling fire. Ottilie deposited Seren on a settee and settled beside her with the air of someone preparing for a delightful secret. "Now," she said, "tell me the real story. Because I know my brother, and whatever he's told you about why he needs a fiancée, it's probably only half the truth." Seren hesitated. How much did Ottilie know? "I met your brother by chance," she said carefully. "At an auction." "The Whitmore estate auction? I heard about that. The family turned on their own cousin, didn't they?" Ottilie's eyes widened. "Wait, you're that cousin? You're Seren Whitmore?" "I am." "And Alaric rescued you?" Ottilie's voice hushed with wonder. "That's terribly romantic. He never does anything romantic." Despite everything, Seren felt her lips twitch. "That seems accurate, from our brief acquaintance. He's not cold, not really. Just careful. After Father died," Ottilie stopped, her brightness dimming momentarily. "Well, it's been a difficult year. He takes responsibility for everything. I think sometimes he forgets he's allowed to want things for himself." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed. Seren thought about the man who had claimed her in front of 50 witnesses, who had negotiated a false engagement with cool precision. "Your grandmother," she said slowly. "The dowager. What should I expect?" Ottilie's expression flickered with something complicated. "Grandmother is formidable. She's chosen Lady Araminta Holt as his ideal bride. Suitable family, appropriate connections, perfectly biddable temperament. And she won't welcome an unknown woman suddenly appearing as his betrothed." "No." Ottilie squeezed Seren's hand. "But she respects strength. Don't let her intimidate you. Don't apologize for existing, and whatever you do, don't let her see you flinch." The door opened, and Alaric entered, his greatcoat removed, his dark hair slightly disheveled. "Grandmother wishes to meet Miss Whitmore," he said. "Now." Serene's stomach dropped. Ottilie's grip tightened. "Already?" Ottilie demanded. "Can't it wait until morning?" Grandmother heard about the auction. Word travels fast. Alaric's winter-gray gaze met Serene's. "I'll be with you. But this conversation cannot be delayed." Serene rose on unsteady legs, her patched cloak, her worn boots, her mud-stained hem. She was about to face a dowager duchess looking like a refugee from a workhouse. But she'd faced worse. She'd stood in her own home and been called a thief. She'd been dragged before a crowd and denounced as a liar. She could survive this. "Lead the way," she said, and followed the Duke of Ashworth into battle. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth received them in her private sitting room, a space decorated in severe shades of gray and silver that matched its occupant perfectly. She sat in a high-backed chair near the window, her posture so rigidly correct it made Serene's spine ache in sympathy. Her hair was white, swept into an elaborate arrangement. Her eyes were the same winter storm shade as her grandson's, but sharper, more assessing. She wore black for mourning, but made it look regal rather than somber. "So," she said, before anyone could speak, "this is the woman who has thrown my household into chaos." Serene curtsied, grateful for years of her mother's instruction. "Your Grace." "Don't curtsy to me as if we're at court. Stand up straight and let me look at you." Serene straightened, forcing herself to meet the dowager's gaze directly. She could feel Alaric's presence beside her, solid and silent, offering support simply by existing. The dowager's examination was thorough and merciless. Her eyes traveled from Serene's disheveled hair to her patched cloak to her mud-stained hem. "Marcus Whitmore's daughter," the dowager said finally. "I remember him. A tradesman who married above himself and raised his child to expect the same." "My father was a gentleman," Serene said, keeping her voice level. "And my mother was the daughter of a viscount. I was raised to know my worth, Your Grace, regardless of what others might assume." Something flickered in the dowager's expression, not approval exactly, but perhaps the absence of immediate dismissal. "Sit," she commanded. "Alaric, you may go." "I'd prefer to stay, Grandmother." "I'm sure you would. But this conversation is between Miss Whitmore and myself." Alaric hesitated. Serene caught his eye and gave a slight nod. Whatever this was, she needed to face it alone. He left, though not without a backward glance. The door closed. The silence stretched. "Now," the dowager said, "tell me the truth. Not the fiction my grandson has concocted, but the actual circumstances that led you to arrive at my doorstep, looking like a scullery maid." Serene considered lying, but something in the dowager's eyes suggested deception would be both futile and fatal. "My father died 14 months ago," she said. "My mother had already been gone 3 years. I was alone, but comfortable. The estate was modest, but sufficient. And then? My father's half-brother's family arrived. They produced a will no one had ever seen, claiming my father had left everything to Evo, with nothing for me but a small allowance that never materialized. Did you contest it? I tried, but I had no money for lawyers, no powerful connections." Serene's hands tightened in her lap. "When I refused to leave quietly, they accused me of theft, of forgery. They had me removed from my own home by constables while the neighbors watched." The dowager's expression remained a mask of carved stone. "And today? I went back for my mother's locket. Your grandson arrived, saw what was happening, and made a decision I still don't entirely understand. He claimed you as his betrothed. Yes, in front of 50 witnesses. Yes. The Dowager rose, moving to the window. She stood with her back to Seren, looking out at the darkened garden. My grandson, she said quietly, has not been himself since his father died. 8 months ago, quite suddenly. A fever that came on without warning and took him within a week. Alaric was in Cornwall inspecting the mining operations. He sailed and rode for 2 days without rest, and still arrived too late. Seren's chest tightened. She hadn't known, couldn't have known, but the weight of it settled over her like a shroud. Since then, he's been performing his duties with mechanical precision, managing the estates, attending Parliament. But not here. Not really here. I'm sorry, Seren said softly, for your loss and for his. Are you? The Dowager turned, her gaze sharp. Or are you simply saying what's expected? Both, perhaps. But the sorrow is genuine. I know what it is to lose a father. Something in the Dowager's rigid posture softened, almost imperceptibly. She returned to her chair. I chose Lady Araminta Holt for my grandson, because she is exactly what a duchess should be. Wealthy, connected, trained from birth to manage a great household. She would ask nothing of him, challenge nothing, and require no emotional investment. That sounds convenient. It sounds dead. The Dowager's voice cracked. I wanted him to have something easy because I thought he couldn't survive anything difficult. I was trying to protect him from feeling anything too deeply. Seren sat very still, afraid any movement might shatter this unexpected honesty. And now, the Dowager continued, he's brought home a disgraced nobody with no fortune and no apparent qualifications beyond the ability to stand upright while being insulted. And for the first time in 8 months, I saw something in his eyes other than duty. What did you see? Interest. Perhaps even purpose. You've managed to do in one afternoon what I couldn't accomplish in 8 months. You've made him care about something. Seren didn't know how to respond. This wasn't what she'd expected. I don't approve of this arrangement, the Dowager said, her voice hardening back toward steel. I think it's reckless, poorly planned, and likely to end in disaster. But I'm not going to stop it. Why not? Because my grandson chose you. For whatever reason, he made a decision to protect you, and he hasn't made a decision based on anything other than obligation in months. The Dowager leaned forward, her eyes pinning Serene in place. But understand this, Miss Whitmore. If you hurt him, if you manipulate his grief, I will destroy you so thoroughly that your cousin's accusations will seem like mild inconveniences. I understand, Your Grace. Do you? Because I am not speaking of social destruction. I am speaking of erasure. The threat hung in the air, cold and absolute. Serene held the Dowager's gaze without flinching. I have no intention of hurting your grandson. I have every intention of honoring our agreement. But I will not be intimidated into pretending I'm something I'm not. Good. The Dowager rose, signaling the conversation's end. You'll need that spine. Society will be considerably less polite than I am. She ran for a servant, and Seren found herself escorted to the Rose Suite, her head spinning with everything she'd learned. The next 7 days passed in a blur of silk and scrutiny. Madame Fortescue, the modiste hôtelier summoned, was a tiny woman with steel-gray hair and the merciless precision of a military commander. She descended upon Seren with measuring tapes and fabric swatches, clucking her tongue at the state of Seren's existing wardrobe. The sapphire for evening, she announced, draping fabric across Seren's shoulder. It brings warmth to your complexion, the dove gray for morning calls, the cream with silver embroidery for the Harrington ball. Nothing pink, nothing yellow, nothing that will make you look like every other insipid debutante. She's not fishing for a husband, Ottilie reminded her. She's already caught one. All the more reason to dress like a woman secure in her position. Seren stood for hours while seamstresses pinned and tucked. She learned to walk in heeled slippers. She practiced sitting in corseted gowns without wincing. She memorized the subtle differences between morning dress and afternoon dress, and evening dress and ball gown. Ottilie coached her on society's hierarchy with cheerful ruthlessness. Lady Harrington is a gossip, but ultimately harmless. Lady Sinclair is dangerous, but respects courage. The Thornwood sisters will befriend anyone who flatters them sufficiently. And Lady Araminta Holt, the woman your grandmother chose for Alaric. Yes, Ottilie's brightness dimmed. She's not cruel, exactly, but she's been raised to believe she's entitled to whatever she wants, and she's wanted Alaric since we were children. A dance instructor arrived, a severe Frenchwoman named Madame Leblanc, who spent 3 afternoons forcing Seren through waltzes and quadrilles until her feet ached. "You are not a peasant stumbling through mud," Madame Leblanc snapped. "You are a woman who commands space. Move as if you own every room you enter." "I don't own anything," Seren muttered. "Then pretend until you do." Through it all, Alaric remained a ghost in his own house. She caught glimpses of him at meals, where he was polite but distant. She heard his voice echoing from his study, conducting business with secretaries. She passed him once in the hallway, and he nodded with perfect courtesy before continuing on his way. "He's always like this," Ottilie said one evening, finding Seren in the library. "When something difficult is happening, he retreats into work. After Father died, I didn't see him for nearly a month. That sounds lonely. It is, for him, and for everyone who loves him." Ottilie settled into a nearby chair. "He won't reach out first. He's too proud, too convinced that needing people is a weakness. Then how does anyone get through to him? They don't, usually. But maybe you'll be different." The night before the Harrington ball, Seren stood before the mirror in her completed gown, scarcely recognizing the woman who stared back. The sapphire silk skimmed her figure before falling in elegant waves. Her dark hair was arranged in a style that Ottilia's maid had perfected. Small diamonds, borrowed from Ottilie, sparkled at her ears and throat. She looked like she belonged. The thought terrified her. A soft knock interrupted her reflection. She turned to find Alaric standing in the doorway, his cool regard taking in her transformation. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was carefully neutral. "You look—" He stopped. She waited. "Adequate," he finished finally. "You'll do." It was, perhaps, the least romantic compliment she'd ever received, but something in his eyes told a different story. Something that lingered on the curve of her neck, the sweep of her gown. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said, matching his formality. "For everything." He nodded once and disappeared, leaving her alone with the growing certainty that tomorrow would change everything. The Harrington ball was a glittering cage of candles and curiosity. Seren felt the weight of 100 gazes the moment they entered, whispers trailing in their wake like silk against marble. The Duke of Ashworth and his mysterious betrothed, the scandal that had set society ablaze. "Steady," Alaric murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Remember, you belong here." She didn't. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was a masquerade she couldn't sustain. But she lifted her chin, arranged her features into calm composure, and descended the stairs at his side. Lady Harrington greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your Grace, and this must be the famous Miss Whitmore. We've heard so much about you." "All scandalous, I'm sure," Seren replied, surprising herself with her own steadiness. "I do hope the reality isn't too disappointing." Lady Harrington's smile flickered. "Not at all. You're quite unexpected." It wasn't a compliment, but Seren chose to receive it as one. She curtsied with the precision Madame Leblanc had drilled into her and allowed Alaric to guide her into the ballroom. The space was overwhelming, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow light across dancing couples. The orchestra playing a waltz that seemed to pulse in time with Seren's rapid heartbeat. Silk and jewels and careful smiles everywhere she looked. Ottilie appeared at her elbow, resplendent in pale rose. "You're doing beautifully. Everyone is absolutely dying to know who you are." "Which do you prefer, the secret elopement theory or the foreign princess in disguise?" "The princess one, obviously. Much more dramatic." Ottilie squeezed her arm. "The vultures are circling at 3 o'clock. Lady Pemberton and her ghastly daughter. I'll intercept them." She swept away, leaving Seren momentarily alone, as Alaric was drawn into conversation with a cluster of older gentlemen. Seren used the opportunity to study the room, identifying faces from Ottilie's lessons. There was Lady Sinclair. There were the Thornwood sisters. There was the Dowager, watching from a corner with hawk-like attention. And there, emerging from the crowd like a vengeful goddess in rose silk, was Lady Araminta Holt. She was beautiful. Serene had expected that, but the reality was somehow worse. Golden hair arranged in perfect curls, porcelain skin, blue eyes that could have been lovely if they weren't currently radiating barely concealed fury. "Miss Whitmore," Lady Araminta's voice was sugar and arsenic. "What a pleasure to finally meet you. Lady Araminta, your reputation precedes you. Lady Ottilie speaks highly of your persistence." Something dangerous flickered in those blue eyes. "Ottilie has always been kind, perhaps too kind." "What do you mean?" Lady Araminta moved closer, lowering her voice. "I mean that I know what you are. A fortune hunter who stumbled into an opportunity and seized it. A desperate woman playing a role she's not equipped to sustain. You seem very certain of things you couldn't possibly know." "I know Alaric. I've known him since we were children. I know his sense of duty, his need to rescue things." "You're his latest project, Miss Whitmore. A charity case he'll tire of." The words landed like blows, finding the vulnerable places Serene had tried to armor. "When he does tire of you," Lady Araminta continued, "I'll still be here. I'll always be here." How magnanimous. I'm simply stating facts. Lady Araminta's gaze swept over Serene's gown. Borrowed diamonds, borrowed dress, borrowed life. Enjoy it while it lasts. She glided away, leaving Serene standing alone, Lady Araminta's poison working through her bloodstream. The first waltz is beginning. Serene turned to find Alaric beside her, his hand extended. "What did Lady Araminta say to you?" "Nothing of consequence." The lie came out smooth. "Shall we?" He led her onto the floor as the music swelled. His hand found her waist, her palm pressed to his, and they began to move. "You're trembling," he observed quietly. "I'm nervous. This is my first ball." "You're lying." His grip tightened slightly. "What did she say?" Serene kept her eyes fixed on his cravat. "She reminded me of certain realities, that this is temporary, that I'm a project." Alaric was silent for so long that she finally looked up. His expression had hardened into something unreadable. "You're not a project." "No?" "No." He guided her through a turn. "You're an unexpected complication I haven't figured out how to categorize. That's entirely different." Despite everything, Serene felt her lips twitch. How flattering. "I'm not good at flattery. I'm good at truth." His voice dropped lower. "The truth is that Lady Araminta sees you as a threat, because you are one. The truth is that my grandmother has been watching you all evening with something dangerously close to approval. The truth is that you've handled tonight with more grace than half the women in this room who were born to this life." "And what's your truth?" He didn't answer immediately. The waltz swept them past the watching crowd. "My truth," he said finally, is that I haven't felt this uncertain about anything in years, and I'm beginning to think uncertainty might not be entirely unwelcome." The music ended. They stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by applause that barely registered. Then Ottilie appeared, breathless and bright. "You were wonderful. Lady Sinclair told me she hasn't seen Alaric dance like that since before Father died." The spell shattered. Alaric released Seren with careful formality. "I should circulate," he said. "Miss Whitmore, if you'll excuse me." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Seren with the echoes of his almost confession. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions. She danced with elderly earls and young viscounts, answered the same questions a dozen different ways. Ottilie stayed close, deflecting the worst of the curiosity seekers. But Lady Araminta's words kept circling back. Borrowed, temporary, a project he'll tire of. When they finally returned to Ashworth House near midnight, Seren pleaded exhaustion and retreated to her room. She sat before her mirror, watching the maid remove the borrowed diamonds, and tried to remember why she'd agreed to this arrangement. Security, independence, a chance to rebuild, not feelings, not hope, not whatever dangerous thing was growing between her and a man who kept her at arm's length even as he defended her. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. She opened the door to find a small rosewood box on the threshold, tied with silver ribbon. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay her mother's locket. A note in masculine handwriting read simply, "The first condition fulfilled. 2 more to go." As Seren clutched the locket to her chest and wept. 3 days after the Harrington ball, Seren found Alaric in the library at midnight. She hadn't meant to seek him out. Sleep had eluded her, thoughts spinning endlessly between Lady Araminta's poison and the locket that now hung against her heart, and she'd wandered downstairs hoping a book might quiet her mind. Instead, she found the Duke of Ashworth, sprawled in a leather chair, his cravat loosened, a glass of amber liquid balanced on the armrest, staring at nothing. "I can leave," she said from the doorway. "Stay." He didn't look at her. "I find I don't want to be alone tonight." It was the most honest thing he'd said to her since the carriage. Seren entered quietly, settling into the chair across from his. The fire had burned low, casting shifting shadows across his face. He looked younger in this light. Tired, almost vulnerable. "How did you get my mother's locket?" she asked softly. "I sent someone to purchase it before the auction concluded. Your cousin tried to refuse, but money has a way of changing minds. You didn't have to do that. I gave you my word." Silence stretched between them, comfortable in a way Seren hadn't expected. She watched the firelight play across his features and wondered what it cost him to be this controlled, every moment of every day. "Ottilie told me about your father," she said. "That you didn't make it back in time." His hand tightened on the glass. "Ottilie talks too much. She loves you. She's worried. Everyone is worried about the Duke of Ashworth, whether he'll manage the estates properly, whether he'll marry appropriately." The bitterness in his voice was sharp. "No one worries about Alaric. No one even remembers he exists. I do." He looked at her then. Really looked. Those storm-colored eyes searching her face. "My father was the only person who ever saw me as more than a title," he said quietly. "He used to take me fishing when I was a boy, just the 2 of us. He'd tell me stories about my mother, about how they met. He said love was worth any price." "He sounds wonderful." He was. Alaric's voice cracked almost imperceptibly. "And I wasn't there when he needed me. I was in Cornwall reviewing mining operations while my father died alone. He wasn't alone. Ottilie was with him. Your grandmother was with him." "But I wasn't." He set down the glass with careful precision. "I've spent 8 months trying to be everything he was, the perfect Duke, and none of it matters because I failed when it counted most." Seren rose from her chair and crossed to kneel beside his. It was improper, dangerous. She didn't care. You didn't fail, she said. You weren't given a chance to succeed. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She reached up, her fingers brushing his jaw. My father died believing he'd failed us. He apologized to me every day for the last year of his life. But he didn't fail. He was cheated by someone he trusted. Alaric's breath caught. How do you do that? Do what? See through everything. All the walls, all the pretense. You look at me like you can see exactly who I am underneath. Maybe because I know what it's like to hide, to perform a role because the alternative is falling apart. And who are you, underneath? Terrified, she admitted. Angry, grieving for a life I'll never get back, wanting things I have no right to want. What things? The question hung between them. This, she whispered, here, with you. Not the borrowed dresses or the diamond earrings, just this. Someone who sees me. Alaric's hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm against his face. His eyes were dark, more open than she'd ever seen them. I'm not good at this, he said. At feelings, at wanting things. I've spent so long being what everyone needed that I forgot how to be anything else. Then maybe we can learn together. The fire crackled. The clock struck 1. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, something shifted between them that could never be shifted back. I should let you sleep, Alaric said finally, though he made no move to release her hand. You should. Still, neither of them moved. Seren. Her name in his voice was a revelation. I don't know what this is becoming, but I know I don't want it to end. She leaned forward and pressed a kiss to his forehead, soft and chaste, and somehow more intimate than anything else they'd shared. Then don't let it, she said, and left him alone with the dying fire and everything unspoken between them. The Thornwood Music Hall was a disaster from the moment they arrived. Lady Araminta had positioned herself strategically near the entrance. Her smile was honey over broken glass. Your Grace, Miss Whitmore. How delightful. I was just telling Lady Thornwood how much I've been looking forward to the performance. Lady Araminta, Alaric's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't realize you'd be attending. Oh, I never miss a musical. Such an intimate setting for conversation. Her blue eyes fixed on Seren. I do hope your voice has recovered, Miss Whitmore. Lady Harrington mentioned you seemed rather strained. My voice is perfectly well, thank you. How fortunate. One hears such dreadful rumors about common complaints affecting the lower classes. The insult was wrapped in concern so perfectly that any objection would seem petulant. I appreciate your concern for my health, Lady Araminta, Seren replied. How thoughtful of you to consider those less fortunate than yourself. Something ugly flickered behind Araminta's smile. Before she could respond, Ottilie appeared, linking her arm through Seren's. There you are. Lady Thornwood specifically asked to be introduced. She swept Seren away, leaving Alaric to navigate Lady Araminta alone. The musicale itself was tedious. Seren sat beside Ottilie and tried to focus on the music rather than Lady Araminta's poisonous glances. When the interval finally arrived, she escaped to a small conservatory, desperate for air. The glass-walled room was humid and fragrant, filled with exotic plants. Seren pressed her forehead against the cool glass, willing her racing pulse to slow. Hiding? She turned to find Alaric in the doorway. Recovering, she corrected. Your social events are exhausting. They exhaust me as well. He entered the conservatory, closing the door behind him. I saw Lady Araminta corner you again. What did she say this time? The same things she always says, that I'm temporary, common, unworthy. Seren laughed without humor. She's not wrong about most of it. She's wrong about all of it. Is she? Seren met his eyes directly. I am temporary, Alaric. That was our agreement. What if I don't want a graceful separation? The words hung in the humid air. You don't know what you want. You're still grieving. I'm convenient, nothing more. Don't. His voice sharpened. Don't tell me what I feel. I've spent 8 months having everyone tell me what I should feel. I won't take it from you. Then tell me yourself. What do you feel? He was standing so close now she could see the pulse beating in his throat. I feel like I've been asleep, he said slowly. And you woke me up. I feel like every conversation we have shows me parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. I feel like the thought of this ending, of you leaving, of going back to the way things were before. He stopped, jaw tightening. What? She pressed. It feels like dying. Serene's breath caught. Alaric, I know this wasn't part of the arrangement, but I need you to know that what I feel is real. Whatever happens next, this is real. I'm not the kind of woman dukes marry. I don't care about what kind of woman dukes marry. I care about you. His hands came up to cup her face. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I've imagined everything between us, and I'll never speak of it again. She should lie, should protect them both. I can't, she whispered. I can't tell you that. Then stop fighting it. He kissed her. Not the careful, performative kisses they'd shared for audiences. This was real, hungry, desperate, his mouth claiming hers with an urgency that stole her breath, her hands fisted in his lapels, pulling him closer, and she kissed him back with everything she'd been trying not to feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Seren saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. This changes everything, she said. It was always going to change everything. His thumb traced her lower lip. The question is whether we're brave enough to let it. Before she could answer, the conservatory door crashed open. Lady Araminta stood in the doorway, her face twisted with fury. 3 society matrons clustered behind her. I knew it, Araminta hissed. I knew you were nothing but a common fortune hunter. That's enough. Alaric's voice could have frozen the Thames. You forget yourself, Lady Araminta. I forget myself. You're the one carrying on with your supposed betrothed like a man in love with the woman he intends to marry. Alaric stepped in front of Seren, which is considerably more appropriate than lurking in doorways hoping to manufacture scandal. The matrons exchanged uncomfortable glances. This isn't over, Araminta said, trembling with rage. Your grandmother will hear about this. Good. I want everyone to know exactly how I feel about Miss Whitmore and exactly what anyone who insults her can expect. He led Seren past the stunned witnesses, through the music hall, and out into the night. In the carriage, neither spoke. Alaric held her hand in the darkness. The rules were broken. The performance had become real. And tomorrow, the consequences would come crashing down. The Dowager was waiting for them when they arrived home. She stood in the entrance hall like a statue carved from ice, her eyes blazing with fury Serene had never seen. Behind her, Ottilia hovered with an expression of terrified sympathy. Drawing room, the Dowager said. Now. They followed in silence. The servants had vanished. Close the door, she commanded. Alaric obeyed, then moved to stand beside Seren. I have just received 3 separate messages, the Dowager said, her voice deadly calm. From Lady Pemberton, Lady Thornwood, and the Countess of Ashbury, all describing the spectacle my grandson created at this evening's music hall. Grandmother, do not interrupt me. You announced to half of London society that you're in love with this woman. You publicly humiliated Lady Araminta. You created a scandal that will be the talk of every drawing room from here to Edinburgh. Lady Araminta created the scandal by spying on a private moment, Alaric said steadily. I merely responded appropriately. Appropriately? The Dowager's laugh was sharp. You think declaring your feelings in front of witnesses was appropriate? I think protecting the woman I love was necessary. The word love fell into the silence like a stone. The dowager went very still. You've known this woman for 3 weeks. I've known her long enough. You've known her long enough to ruin your family's reputation and destroy alliances I've spent years building. The dowager turned her fury on Seren. Are you satisfied now? Is this what you wanted? Your Grace. You've manipulated my grandson from the moment you met, played on his grief, his loneliness, his compulsion to rescue broken things. That's not true. I never asked for any of this, because you positioned yourself perfectly to be approached, a damsel in distress, publicly humiliated, requiring rescue. The dowager's eyes were merciless. I warned you, Miss Whitmore. She hasn't hurt me. Alaric stepped between them. You're hurting me. You're attacking the woman I love because she doesn't fit your plans. My plans are for your protection. What you call love is infatuation, a temporary madness. In 6 months, you'll realize your mistake. Father would have supported this choice. Your father is dead. The dowager's composure shattered, tears streaming down her face. Your father is dead, and I am trying to save what remains of this family. The words echoed. Alaric had gone pale. I think, the dowager said, her voice rough, that Miss Whitmore should leave. Tonight. She's not going anywhere. Alaric. Seren touched his arm. Perhaps she's right. No. Listen to me. She stepped in front of him. Look at what this is doing to your family. The chaos, the broken relationships. I never wanted to be the reason you fight with the only family you have left. You're not the reason. Her inability to accept my choices is the reason. But if I leave, the fighting stops. You can repair things with your grandmother. I can what? Marry Lady Araminta? Go back to being a walking portrait of a duke with nothing inside but duty and grief? His voice cracked on the last word. Maybe that's better, she whispered. Maybe duty and grief are safer than whatever this is. I don't want safe. I want you. You want an idea of me. But that woman doesn't belong in your world, Alaric. She can visit. She can pretend. But she can never truly belong. Who decides that? Everyone. Society. Your grandmother. The hundreds of people who will always see me as an intruder. The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. I love you. God help me. I love you. But loving you doesn't change who I am or where I come from. You're enough. You're more than enough. Not for your world. She pulled away, backing toward the door. And I won't let you destroy yourself trying to make me fit. Seren, please. I'll be gone by morning. She was openly weeping now. Thank you for everything. The locket, the dresses, the chance to remember what it felt like to hope. Don't do this. I have to. She reached the door. Goodbye, Alaric. She fled up the stairs to the Rose Suite, where she threw her few belongings into the small case she'd arrived with. The beautiful gowns, the borrowed jewelry, she left them all. She took only the locket and the clothes on her back. By midnight, she was gone. The boarding house was worse than she remembered. Seren sat on the narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sounds of London's poorest quarter through thin walls. Someone was coughing in the next room. A baby cried somewhere below. This was reality. The last 3 weeks had been the dream. 3 days passed in gray monotony. She found work as a seamstress in a cramped shop where the light was poor and the pay was worse. Her fingers, soft from weeks of luxury, blistered and bled. She ate thin soup and stale bread. She tried not to think about him at all. Failed constantly. On the 4th day, Ottilie appeared. She stood in the boarding house doorway like a vision from another world, her silk dress impossibly out of place, her face pale with distress. "How did you find me?" Seren asked. "Alaric has had people searching since the moment you left." Ottilie crossed the room and seized her hands. "You have to come back." "I can't." "You can. You must. He's been impossible, Seren. Worse than after Father died. He won't eat, won't sleep, and won't speak to anyone. He'll recover. He's not a duke right now. He's a man who lost the woman he loves, and he's destroying himself." Ottilie's eyes filled with tears. "Please, he needs you." Your grandmother made her position clear. Grandmother regrets what she said. She won't admit it, but I can tell. She went too far. Ottilie gripped her hands tighter. "She's not a monster, Seren. She's a frightened old woman who lost her son and can't bear to lose her grandson, too." She had a point. "I don't belong in your world. You belong wherever you choose to belong, and Alaric has chosen you." Ottilie's voice softened. "Don't you think you deserve to be chosen? After everything you've lost, everything you've survived." Seren thought of her mother, who had chosen love over family approval, thought of her father, who had built a life on determination, thought of Alaric's face in the firelight, telling her she was enough. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of course you are. Love is terrifying, but being without it is worse." Ottilie pulled her to her feet. "Come back. Fight for this. You're the only one who can." Seren looked around the cramped room, at the life she'd resigned herself to. "One conversation," she said. "That's all I'm promising. That's all he needs." Ashworth House loomed against the evening sky, every window blazing with light. Seren climbed out of the carriage on unsteady legs. Ottilie gripped her arm. "He's in his study. Grandmother is in the drawing room. You should probably face her first." "Why?" "Because nothing can move forward until you and she reach an understanding. And because she asked to see you. The Dowager asking to see her. That couldn't be good. But Seren had fled once. She wouldn't flee again." The drawing room was warm and quiet. The Dowager sat in her usual chair, but she looked different. Smaller. Older. "Miss Whitmore, you came back." Lady Ottilie was persuasive. "Ottilie is always persuasive." The Dowager gestured to a chair. "Sit. Please." Seren sat. "I owe you an apology," the Dowager said. The words seemed to cost her something. "What I said that night was cruel and largely untrue. I was frightened, and I lashed out. You were protecting your grandson. I was protecting myself." The Dowager's eyes met hers. "I lost my son. When Alaric started showing feelings for you, I saw another loss coming. I thought if I drove you out, I could spare him that pain. You can't protect people from love, or from loss. No, I've learned that lesson rather too late." The Dowager drew a shaky breath. "My husband died 40 years ago. I loved him desperately, and losing him nearly destroyed me. I've spent 40 years building walls, ensuring no one could hurt me. That sounds lonely. It has been. But it felt safe, until my son died anyway. Until my grandson fell in love anyway." The Dowager's voice cracked. "I'd spent so long trying to prevent pain that I'd forgotten to allow joy." Something shifted in Serene's chest. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," the Dowager continued. "I'm asking for a chance to do better, to accept what my grandson has chosen." "Why would you do that?" "Because I love him. Because I've seen what losing you has done to him." The Dowager's voice cracked. "And because you make him happy." Seren felt tears prick her eyes. "I love him too." "Then go to him." The Dowager rose. "He's been waiting 4 days. Don't make him wait any longer." Seren climbed the stairs to Alaric's study. The door was closed. Light flickered beneath it. She knocked. No answer. "Alaric." It's me. Slowly, the door opened. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted. But his eyes, when they met hers, blazed with something that stole her breath. You came back. I came back. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry. I was scared, and I ran. I won't do it again. Promise me. I promise. He pulled back, his hands framing her face. I love you. I don't care about society or scandal. I want you to be my wife. Really my wife. Not a performance. Alaric, marry me. Because I can't imagine my life without you. Because you make me brave enough to feel things I'd given up on. Your grandmother has already given her blessing, reluctantly, with many conditions. But she gave it. Seren laughed through her tears. You're very presumptuous. I would have searched forever if you hadn't come back. He pressed his forehead to hers. Say yes. Please. She kissed him instead, soft and fierce and full of promise. Yes, she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times. Yes. The Ashbury Ball was the event of the season, and everyone was waiting to see what the Duke of Ashworth would do. Rumors had been swirling for a week. The betrothal was real. The Dowager had reversed her position. No one knew what was true. Seren stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gown of midnight blue silk. Diamond stars scattered through her upswept hair. They weren't borrowed this time. Alaric had given them to her that morning. Ready? He murmured beside her. No, but I'm doing it anyway. Together, then. They descended the stairs, and the ballroom fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward them. Seren saw Lady Sinclair's appraising nod, the Thornwood sisters whispering frantically, Ottilie beaming from the crowd, the Dowager watching with soft eyes. And she saw Lady Araminta, pale and rigid near the refreshment table. Let them watch. Let them whisper. She was done hiding. The orchestra began a waltz. Alaric extended his hand. Dance with me? They danced alone for the first measures. Then, slowly, other couples joined. They're accepting us, Seren breathed. They're accepting you. His eyes sparkled with rare humor. You're the one who stormed their fortress. The waltz ended, but Alaric didn't release her. Instead, he kept her hand and turned to face the crowd. I have an announcement, he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Miss Whitmore and I are engaged to be married. The wedding will take place next month at Ashworth Park. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but that's not all. Alaric's grip on her hand tightened. I want to address the rumors about Miss Whitmore's character. The accusations levied by her cousin, Ivo Whitmore, were false. Entirely, deliberately, maliciously false. I have obtained evidence proving that Ivo Whitmore forged the will that disinherited her. Evidence that will be presented to the authorities tomorrow. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Miss Whitmore was cast out of her home by liars and cheats. She survived with her integrity intact and her spirit unbroken. His voice softened as he looked at her. That is the woman I'm marrying, the bravest person I've ever known. Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling until it filled the ballroom. Seren saw Ottilie weeping with joy, saw the Dowager nod firmly. You didn't tell me, she whispered. I wanted it to be a surprise. His eyes were bright. I couldn't give you back everything you lost, but I could give you your name. She kissed him then, right there in the middle of the Ashbury ballroom. Let them be scandalized. When they finally broke apart, society had already begun rewriting history. The Duke of Ashworth and his remarkable betrothed, a love story for the ages. 1 year later, the library at Ashworth Park was warm, with windows overlooking rolling gardens. Seren sat in her favorite chair, a book open in her lap. She wasn't reading. She was watching her husband. Alaric sprawled on the rug with their daughter, a 6-month-old miracle with his gray eyes and her dark hair. He was making ridiculous faces, his ducal dignity completely abandoned. "You're terrible at this," Serene observed. "Watch." He made another face, and Catherine, named for Seren's mother, erupted in delighted giggles. I stand corrected. Alaric gathered the baby and settled beside Seren. "She has your smile. She has your stubbornness. That's determination. Very different." Seren laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. The locket hung against her heart. She wore it always now. "The Dowager sent word this morning," Alaric said. "She's arriving next week for the christening." "Good. I've missed them." "You've missed Ottilie. Grandmother, you tolerate. Your grandmother and I have reached an understanding. She stops predicting disaster, and I stop proving her wrong." Catherine yawned, her tiny fist curling around Alaric's finger. "Do you ever think about how we met?" Seren asked softly. "Constantly. The auction? Your face when you realized I was a duke. The way you negotiated conditions." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You were magnificent." I was terrified. Magnificently terrified. His smile softened. "I fell in love with you that first night, in the carriage, when you demanded your mother's locket and refused to be intimidated. That's when you fell in love? That's when I knew I was in trouble. The actual falling took longer." He kissed her forehead. "But it was worth every moment." The fire crackled. Catherine dozed against her father's chest. Outside, the garden stretched toward a horizon painted gold. Seren thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Desperate, disinherited, dragged from her own home. She'd believed her life was over. Instead, it had only begun. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." Alaric's arm tightened around her. "Always. Forever." She believed him. After everything they'd survived, she believed him completely. Some stories begin with a ball or a chance meeting. Theirs had begun with cruelty, with injustice, with a moment when she'd been cast out without mercy. But it ended here, in warmth and love, and a future brighter than anything she'd dared to imagine. And that, Seren thought, was the best kind of ending. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you'd like more romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.